Jim Gordon here in the offices of the Richmond Sentinel. Time for another edition of Richmond Stories. She is a registered dietitian, clinical consultant, and media. She is a certified meditation and NLP master practitioner, hypnotherapist, philanthropist, podcaster. She is also the author of The Empowered Mind-Diet Equation, a bestseller. And I should say she is also the most recent columnist to join us here on the Richmond Sentinel family. Here in the offices of the Richmond Sentinel, it's my pleasure to welcome Rika Mansingh. Rika, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim. So grateful to be here.
Great to have you, and welcome on board for your column on the Richmond Sentinel, which you can see now. Your first column just went to print.
Thank you.
We wanted to have you in because your column and what you do for a living, I think people more and more are trying to get healthier, eat healthier, but it can be intimidating. You've got to educate yourself. Let's start with some general questions. What does a general healthy diet look like?
So Jim, a general healthy diet is actually very easy to follow, and it's going to include a rainbow of color.
Okay.
So your brightly colored vegetables and your fruits, your whole grains, and your lean poultry and fish as well. A very, very easy way to manage our portions is to not count calories and actually weigh your food. Right. But if you look at the plate model, half your plate could be your vegetables, right? As much color as possible. Mm-hmm. A quarter of your plate could be your lean poultry or your fish, which is about the palm size of your hand.
Right.
And the other quarter of your plate could be the multi-grain quinoa or brown and wild rice, just to get some fiber in your meal.
Do you find, because you're sought after for what you do and your advice and your education, do you find that part of the challenge is, of course, as we mentioned, education, but also people, they go, I don't want to cook, I don't know how to cook. I mean, do you also try to ease them in?
Definitely.
Step by step?
Definitely.
Because what you mentioned, I eat, but I don't do a lot of cooking.
Right.
So I'm getting that quinoa or this, I'm getting it from the store, which can lead to price too. So
exactly. And the thing is, what's important to know is just a little bit of planning maybe the night before. Okay. Maybe cook for the next 2 days.
Okay.
Just planning will take you a long way. Yes.
One of the other questions, and I know there are arguments on both sides, I happen to be on the pro side of this, but is it necessary to take multivitamins and mineral supplements?
So food first is a dietitian motto for sure. So if a person is eating a variety of foods with lots of color and a well-balanced diet, they may not need vitamin and mineral supplements. But as we know, Jim, everybody is so busy with hectic lifestyles, often skipping meals and racing against time. And that's where vitamin and mineral supplements come into play. Also, vegetarians will need to take vitamin and mineral supplements.
Right.
People that have allergies and that are eliminating food groups for whatever reason will need to supplement. Also, certain medication actually inhibit the absorption of some vitamins and minerals, as well as alcohol. Okay. So when we are eating or drinking certain foods, we have to make sure that we are supplementing with our B vitamins.
Do you find too that one of the parts of this equation of eating better and educating yourself that I've always wished would come out more, it's not an excuse for, but I find that a constant complaint I hear is that people just say, as you mentioned earlier, there's not enough time.
Yes.
If you're on a certain income, it might be faster as a single parent, or even if you're in a couple, to just stop and get that pizza because it's $18 and it feeds a family of 4. You have to do this, as you said, in baby steps, but do you find that once people get into that line of thinking of that you keep them on that path? I mean, it's like exercising, right?
So what I try to do is always let people know when you eat healthily, you're actually going to feel better, right? And your whole foods are not as expensive. It's the processed foods in a box that are more expensive. So if a person is having beans and lentils and peas, even canned tuna, they're not expensive. They're good for your mind, and when you're eating healthily, you feel good. And when you make that association with what you eat and how it makes you feel, a person is more likely to sustain that pattern of eating.
Let's talk about, before we get into some more questions,
Yes.
let's talk about your credentials. As I mentioned off the top, you do a lot of things. Can you give us a little background on how your journey began into health and wellness?
Okay, so first of all, a little bit about my journey. Originally born in South Africa.
You can hear that accent. Yeah, people are probably wondering, what's that accent, right?
I moved to Canada close to 16 years ago
Okay.
and have been working as a registered dietitian for over 21 years. And from a young age, I was always acutely aware of the profound effect that good food choices could have on our health and well-being. And I'm incredibly grateful to my parents because my dad, who's a physician, had this incredible insight, recognizing the proactive approach a dietitian can make in preventing and managing diseases of lifestyle. And this ignited my passion for dietetics, knowing that I could make a meaningful difference to patients' lives. And what brings me joy and fulfillment, Jim, is to actually witness firsthand the transformative power of good nutrition on patients. So many people have better energy, better mood. They reduce their reliance on medication.
Right.
And many patients actually eliminate their medication completely just by making healthier food choices.
Let's talk about your book, The Empowered Mind Diet Equation, a bestseller. You can find it everywhere, obviously.
Amazon,
of course, is the way to go. You mentioned the mindset diet. Let's talk about the connection. Highlight that connection between diet and a mindset to empower individuals.
Right. So in my book, I create the awareness of the role of diet in mental well-being. And I always focus on the mind because the mind is the most powerful asset. And to achieve any goal, it all starts with the mind, right? And when we eat healthily for the mind, we think well, we feel well, we have better, healthier behavior. Also, we have better mood, we have better sleep, better energy.
It's funny, I don't think enough can be placed upon the amount of sleep that people need.
Yes.
Most of us don't get enough. And
Yes.
it's so important because mind preservation and how it relates to Alzheimer's.
Yes.
No cure, obviously,
Right.
but are there more and more facts and studies coming out about sleep and healthy diet?
Oh, there's tons. I could speak about so many things when it comes to sleep. First of all, we do know that sleep is important to help prevent or lower your risk of Alzheimer's disease because when you're sleeping well, your brain actually gets cleansed by cerebrospinal fluid.
Right.
So it removes some of these beta amyloid protein plaques that we see in the brain. So definitely beneficial for memory. The other thing about sleep is if we're not getting enough sleep, our hunger hormone called ghrelin increases.
Right.
And the hormone that makes us get full after eating, leptin, it decreases. So when you're not sleeping well, the next day you're going to be super hungry and you're not going to get full with what you're eating. So lack of sleep is going to cause a person to gain weight.
I've talked to people, friends, I'm sure you see this all the time, where I'm going to do this diet, that diet. I think one of the most challenging journeys you can go on is getting off sugar and processed sugar.
Yes.
Talk about how that affects your mind, your sleep, your mood.
Yes, okay, sugar. In my book, I actually called sugar a culprit. And did you know that sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine?
Wow.
It is.
Oh, goodness.
And so how it works is this. When we eat sugar or a meal that contains sugar, when we cause those rapid spikes in your blood sugar, we actually feel good. Our mood is boosted. We feel uplifted. And that is because we increase serotonin, a feel-good chemical messenger, and dopamine, as seen with many drugs, right? So we actually feel rewarded. And what happens not long after consuming sugar is our blood sugars will actually drop. And then what happens? Now we're tired, we're lethargic, we're feeling moody, we're irritable, we're anxious, also feeling depressed. But we create more cravings for sugar. So whenever you eat sugar, you're going to feel good, and not long after that, you're going to crave more sugar. And the more sugar you eat, the more weight you gain. Right? And we cause more fat to be stored. The other thing when it comes to memory is that if we're eating a lot of sugar and we have high levels of glucose in the brain, the glucose combines with protein in the brain, and that causes beta amyloid protein plaques as seen in Alzheimer's disease. So researchers are actually calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes.
Wow.
And Jim, another thing about sugar is that if you're eating sugar close to bedtime, your sleep is definitely going to be disrupted. So we were speaking about sleep because that will create an imbalance in your blood sugars.
You know, it's interesting too. It's little things as well. We were talking a few weeks ago and you were asking me about exercise and your morning routine, and I was saying, I get a little hungry, but you were saying, you know, just the elimination of bread, a piece of toast, let's say, first thing in the morning, removing that as maybe less craving late morning.
Exactly, Jim. And the thing is, if you do have bread, right, it must be the multi-grain, high-fiber bread. So not all carbs are bad. The refined carbs, your white bread, your white rice, your white pasta, anything with white flour, these are the carbs we don't like. And the reason we don't like them is because when we eat them, we don't really get full. We could easily have that whole plate of rice.
Right.
And when those foods are digested, they cause a rapid rise of sugar into the blood. And again, when the sugar goes up, it goes down, we eat more sugar. So what we can do is when we're eating a meal, always have a smaller meal and make sure that meal has fiber.
Right.
So that even if there's sugar in that meal, the sugar is digested slower over a longer time, and we stay full for a longer time before we feel hungry again.
You mentioned fiber a lot. Are you a big fan of fiber supplements? I take a fiber drink religiously every day.
Yes.
Is that something you would recommend?
So if a person's eating a lot of fiber in their diet, coming from your oats, your quinoa, your brown and wild rice, your beans, your peas, your lentils, your vegetables, you would be getting a lot of fiber. But as we all know, many people don't eat all their portions of fruit and vegetables. And in that case, it would be beneficial to have fiber for many reasons. For digestive health, it helps lower cholesterol. There's just tons of benefits to fiber.
In your book, The Empowered Mind Diet Equation, you also talk about the gut as a second brain. Explain.
Yes. So, Jim, the gut is regarded as the second brain, right? And so there's a very intimate bi-directional relationship that occurs via the gut and the brain, right? So did you know that 95% of serotonin, the feel-good chemical messenger, is actually produced in the gut? Okay. So if we're eating unhealthily and if we're not digesting our foods well, we will have inflammation in the gut, which can lead to inflammation in the brain. And that can affect your mood, your energy, your sleep. And so it is important to recognize that what we eat is going to affect our mental health via the gut. So I always say the gut is not like Vegas. What happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut.
Oh.
Yes, and Jim, it works the other way as well.
Okay.
If you are eating while you're in the rush and you're stressed and you're feeling anxious, that mental state will cause your digestive processes to be impaired, so you wouldn't digest that meal that well.
A friend of mine, actually, you mentioned inflammation of the gut. She took her a long time to realize that she is gluten-free or gluten intolerant, and it's now gluten-free because she would get the inflammation, bloating, and everything.
Yes.
People hear that phrase all the time. It's gluten-free. Is it a fad? Is it crazy? It is a real thing.
Yes.
Can you talk to our viewers about that may have heard it but don't quite understand? Because I've got a number of friends that are gluten-free out of necessity. So.
Yeah, so first of all, gluten, the word glue is derived from Latin, gluten, meaning glue, right? And we call it gluten because it's a very sticky-like protein. So it's difficult to digest, right? Now, it's well documented for decades that people with celiac disease, which is an inherited disorder, and people with wheat allergy avoid gluten because gluten is found in your wheat, your barley, your rye, and your breaded products, right? But new research is finding that many people who are not allergic to gluten actually have digestive issues, inflammation, joint pain, headaches after eating a gluten-containing meal, example, pasta, right? And so we call this non-gluten celiac sensitivity, where you eat a meal, example, pasta, and then headache, sleepy, tired, joint pain. So it's important for a person to be mindful, if I'm eating gluten, how am I really feeling afterwards? And then decide, should I, eliminate or limit gluten? So, yeah. Yeah,
and the good news is if you are choosing that path, there's more and more gluten options compared to 10 years ago. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and in my book, Jim, I also speak about when we don't digest our gluten properly, it forms a protein called gluteomorphin, which actually activates the opiate receptors in our brain, mimicking the effects of morphine and heroin. So that's why you would feel very sleepy and tired
Right.
after eating a very heavily gluten-laden meal.
We go from gluten-free, another diet that has people trying, don't know enough about it, it's the keto diet.
Yes.
What is it? Give us a brief description of what it is, and is this something that people should attempt to do?
Okay, so a keto diet is basically, and very popular, you would see it all over the internet. It's a diet that's very high in fat, moderate in protein, and extremely low in carbohydrate.
Right.
And the reason is to use fats for fuel instead of sugar from carbohydrate. Because as we know, the more sugar we have, the more cravings we have. So it's to prevent those blood sugar imbalances. I wouldn't say that the keto diet is for everyone.
Sure.
I truly believe in an individualized approach, and definitely consult with a registered dietitian or your healthcare professional and make sure you do your lab work before embarking on keto. Because I've seen patients who have been on certain diets, and I monitor their labs at the beginning and at the end, and I can clearly say there's no one size fits all.
Which leads me into my next question. You and I have talked about this before, about that yeah, it has to be personalized.
Yes.
I think seeing someone like you can really help with that, because one
Yes.
size doesn't fit all, and what may
Definitely.
work for you may not work for me, and
Right.
vice versa. One of the other things that we see a lot of is supplements, probiotic supplements.
Yes.
And again, there's so much. If you watch the morning shows, for example,
right.
every commercial break is something pushing something.
Right.
Talk about probiotics, natural,
Right.
otherwise, for people that may not know everything about it.
Yeah, so Jim, basically our probiotics are our healthy, friendly bacteria that we need in our gut.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we eat unhealthily, we have an increase in the bad bacteria of our gut, right? And if we don't replenish them with the good bacteria,
Right.
we create something called dysbiosis. So it's an imbalance in the bacteria. And the thing about probiotics, I'm sure you would have seen live cultures written on yogurt, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
many products, they say live cultures. So this is actually referring to the probiotics. And we've always known probiotics are good for digestion. And we are not only what we eat, we are what we digest. So we need those probiotics to digest our food better, prevent inflammation, gut-brain, inflammation in the brain, all of that. But recent research has shown that probiotics are not only good for digestion, they're good for immunity, they're good for brain health, they're
Right.
good for metabolism. And these bacteria also are now found to produce GABA and serotonin, which make us feel good. So it is very good to have probiotics. So the natural way of getting it is from your fermented foods. So kefir, it's a fermented beverage.
Okay.
Right,
Never
it
heard
has
that
many
before.
strange
Okay.
strains of bacteria.
Right.
Your fermented soybeans, kombucha tea, your miso soup, and sauerkraut, which is a fermented cabbage, kimchi, which is a Korean pickle. So mainly your fermented foods, and not many people enjoy fermented foods, and then it would be wise to take a probiotic supplement.
But you mentioned, I see it all the time on bottles and cans, everything of yogurt.
Right.
But if you take something as simple as yogurt, are you canceling each other out of, because most people get the strawberry flavor, which is like 80% more sugar.
Yes,
Are you
yes.
the probiotics and the sugar? Is there a,
So I would do a plain fat-free, unsweetened
which is not as
yogurt.
delicious,
Not
let's be
as
honest,
good, but you could flavor it with your own blueberries if
Oh,
you'd like.
okay,
Yeah, you
good
can
point.
add your own blueberries to
Yeah.
that. The thing is, our probiotics eat some of the lactose sugar. So if the product has a little bit of sugar, but you're having it with a probiotic, it is better.
Right.
But I would still go with plain fat-free, unsweetened.
Do you have, I noticed we should mention to our viewers, of course, we'll mention your book again, but you also have a website. It's rikadiet4wellness.com. We have it up on the screen right
Yes.
now. Are you helping people out through that, your
Yes.
website, educating, answering questions?
Yes, virtual consults, and yeah, that's it. Through my website, my email is info@rikadiet4wellness.com.
Excellent, excellent. And again, welcome to the Richmond Sentinel.
Thank
We're
you.
excited to have you here. We are talking to our latest member of the Richmond Sentinel, who has joined us here for Richmond Stories in the Richmond Sentinel offices. It is Rika Mansingh. Does a lot of stuff. Her latest book, best-selling author of The Empowered Mind and Mind Diet Equation. We should also mention Awaken the Magic Within, Secrets to Living a Happy and Fulfilled Life is another book you have.
Thank you, Jim.
All your information on our website, as we mentioned earlier. I'm Jim Gordon. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Richmond Stories.